Hello, guys. Good evening. How are you guys today? I hope everything is fine. Unfortunate times. Still 2021. And I don't remember. I think it's been a long time I have recorded a podcast because I was not getting the right topic, the right people. So finally, I'm back, guys. And finally, I am recording my new podcast. And as you've seen the thumbnails already, so today's guest is Mr. Gary Byrne. And let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Gary Byrne. So he has served nearly 30 years in the US Air Force Security. He has been in the uniform division of the Secret Service, and and most recently as the Federal Air Marshal. Apart from this, while he was serving for the Secret Service as a Secret Service officer, Mr. Gary protected ex-US President Mr. Bill Clinton and the first family of the White House. Strong stuff. And he is also the author of the best-selling novel Crisis of Character, which was one of the number one bestsellers in New York. Go give it a read. It's pretty exciting. And today he's my guest, and today we are not going to talk about presidents. We're not going to talk about how he served Bill Clinton, how he how he went about his job. Today, what we are going to discuss is very different. We are going to discuss about movies. You'll be guessing why I'm discussing movies with Mr. Gary. Well, you have seen a number of films. You have seen a number of films where the president is kidnapped, president is killed, and president is taken hostage, and there's a Secret Service agent who turns up and saves the day. So that's all in the movies. But today we are going to discuss with Mr. Gary how things are similar or different in the movies in reality than in the movies, and we're also going to touch a little bit about his life after leaving the Secret Service, his life after writing the book, how things have changed. And that's that. So guys, without wasting much more time, let me welcome Mr. Gary, and I hope you guys will enjoy this podcast. And yeah, you guys are watching Minding My Business, and I'm your host, Avi. Okay, Gary, good morning, and
Morning.
for turning up on a Sunday. I know it's not the ideal day for an interview, but anyways,
It's
never mind.
fine.
And Gary, welcome to my show. This is my podcast, which I do often. It's called Minding My Business, and my name is Avi, and it's a typical Indian name. I've shortened it to Avi, and I am based out of Dubai. And I talk about various stuff, and why I wanted to reach out to you is because obviously of your background, your book, and there are things which we watch on TV, we watch on movies, and I wanted to discuss things with you. So let me start by first saying that you've been so long, you've been in the Secret Service. You are author of the US best-selling novel Crisis of Character. After all this, today what I want to discuss is actually a little bit about your life, and mostly how the movies in Hollywood, and how they portray Secret Service characters, and how in the rest of the world, people like us, we watch all sorts of stuff, and when we see a Gerard Butler coming out, smashing everyone and taking the president out from the the kidnappers, it looks awesome. But I would actually like to know, how true are those things and all that stuff. So let me just get on with it. For most of the people in the world, the movies they make, White House Down, Olympus Has Fallen, Air Force One. I don't know if filmmakers will actually have an access to the real Air Force One. So I don't know how much of it, how much of research does go through in making such stories. But when you watch all this stuff, like, what do you think? Like, oh, it's preposterous, or like mildly true, completely true, very untrue? What are your thoughts?
So most of it, all those movies you mentioned and some more, it's kind of preposterous. But but with that said, there's a few things that sometimes ring true. And then, have you ever heard the saying, fiction, pushes reality? And I'll tell you a funny story. You mentioned the movie Air Force One.
Yeah.
Right. So when Air Force One came out, President Bill Clinton was president.
Yes. Yeah.
And right after when the movie came out, the Clintons, President Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, and Chelsea watched the movie together. And then shortly after that, they were invited out to the Secret Service Training Center in Beltsville, Maryland.
Okay.
And just as a joke, in the movie, the president tries to escape in this pod that shoots out of the plane. So as a joke, the Secret Service made up a mock, like a make-believe pod. And the Clintons thought it was very funny. So some of the behavior you see is real. Most of it's not. It's mostly Hollywood. First of all, like the movie White House Down, the way that actor, the way he fight, most human beings cannot fight like that. And I don't mean they don't have the skills. It's just exhausting.
Yeah.
If you can't shoot them in the head, you're done. So, the Secret Service, to really give your listeners, your viewers, an ideal, and I say this with a little bit of humor, but it's kind of true. So if you want to know what it's like to be in the Secret Service, normally in the movies, a lot of movies, they portray the agents. I was in the uniform division, but most of it's very similar. And one of the things that's very similar, if you want to know what it's like to be in the Secret Service, is go stand outside for 8 hours and then take 15 minutes to go to the bathroom, eat your lunch, and do whatever else you got to do. They'll go stand outside for 8 hours. That's really what it's a lot of boredom with a little bit of excitement. And don't get me wrong, I don't regret any of it. I loved it.
Of course.
But it's a lot of standing, it's a lot of training, and you rarely get to use your skills other than training for the most part. But that's what kind of makes also too, I want you to understand, all these movies you've mentioned, and even the ones you haven't, I usually like them all. I think they're great. They're great entertainment. And sometimes, for instance, the last one in the White House Down series, they're attacked with drones. That's a real possibility. I mean, that's something you got. So anyway, I'll go ahead and stop talking and let you talk. Go ahead.
Like, do you guys, I don't know if it is true, like with all these movies coming out and with all the creativity they have and all sorts of threats, which I don't know if the Secret Service would have imagined that such threats do exist. Like, do you guys see and like think, oh God, this could be possible? Like, as you said, the drones are possible. Do you guys like ever thought like, oh God, like, oh, this is possible? Like, oh, even the Chinese could attack the White House. Like, oh my God, like, is it a possibility?
Yes, it is. So the Secret Service spends a lot of time on what if this happens? What if they do this? What if we do that? And it trickles down from the very top. And sometimes a lot of it starts outside the Secret Service. The Secret Service communicates with the other U.S. government agencies, CIA, FBI, and all this information is fed into a computer, and it collates a lot of this information. And now, like when you see that in movies, that's real. Computers do take this information. Each agency is responsible for putting it in there. And then the computer will spit out maybe a possibility or link names together. For instance, the FBI arrests a guy who is moving money. Maybe they think he's moving money for a terrorist organization. So they enter his information into a computer, whether it be email information, cell phone, his date of birth, everything. Everything. And then it spits out something that 10 years ago, he had an account at Blockbuster. You know what I mean? So that's kind of real. You know, that's possibility. And so when it comes to they call it, you know, in the movies they call it the threat matrix. In real life, we just call it what shit's going to happen next. You know, that's really how we look at it. And some of it, like years ago, might seem bizarre. And I'll give you a real life example.
Yes.
When I joined the Secret Service in 1991, you know, it was 1991. The threats were terrorism, pretty much nation states, you know, what was going on. And then inside, at that time, like my recollection of the biggest threat was like from the movie In the Line of Fire, the crazy person that decides that they're going to trade their life. That's the worst. That's the hardest person to protect somebody from, is the person that's willing to commit suicide or trade their life to do the job, right? So that was, and they filmed that movie In the Line of Fire around the White House. And Clint Eastwood actually came to the White House. So anyway, but setting that aside for a minute. So that's a real threat. So one time, at that time frame, you know, I have, you know, from time to time, I have criticisms about the way the Secret Service is managed. But setting that aside, they do some good stuff, and they.
Of course, of course. I mean,
yeah. Every government agency's got its management problems, but so one of the things they do, sometimes at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, and more if need be, is they have these meetings with the high ups in the Secret Service and everybody that can come. The loneliest officer like myself at the time, and you know, they answer your questions, and then they let you ask questions. Like, so one time somebody I worked with brought up the idea of this is like between 1991 and 1993. We'll say 1993. And the question was, you know, director, have we looked at the possibility of using some kind of military system, missile system, to shoot down a plane in case that ever happened? And he said, yes, we've looked into it. The problem is that the technology is warfare technology. In other words, if you're fighting somewhere in a war zone, it's okay to use it, but it's not reliable enough to use inside a city. And the analogy, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. The analogy that he used was that they were afraid is if they identified a plane that was coming towards the White House and they shot a missile at it, that it would miss that plane and hit an airplane full of children and then fall on top of a bus of blind women. You know what I mean? Like the worst case scenario would happen. So that was out of the question. And then I'll ask you this question. That was out of the question. And then when did that change? That changed on September 11th, 2001, when terrorists crashed planes into New York, right? And now all of a sudden, it's not off the table.
Yeah, it changed everything.
Right. So that's so that was kind of a movie fiction thing, because it was kind of a book thing too, because Tom Clancy writes.
Couldn't imagine like something like that could happen. Yeah.
Well, we could imagine it happened. We couldn't imagine using a missile system to try to stop it. I mean, we always thought it was there. I mean, the Secret Service and the government came to that conclusion that was a possibility a long time ago. The first time I ever read something about it was the American fiction writer Tom Clancy. His first famous book was The Hunt for Red October. And I love this guy. Anyway, he writes a book where a disgruntled Japanese pilot steals a 747 and crashes it into the Capitol. And then you know, everybody, I mean, the Secret Service knew that was a possibility, but when somebody put it in a book and then people start losing their minds, we have to protect against that. And again, they said, you know, these systems, missile systems, you know, let's say you do shoot the plane down. It doesn't just go away, it falls, you know, and so but after 9/11, your perspective changes. That risk seems more reasonable.
Okay. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I don't think anyone, I mean, personally also, we couldn't think of something. I mean, you come and just crash a plane. Yeah, that is something unimaginable, which again, Yeah, now that threat is a normal threat now. I mean, now you could
Yeah.
actually keep it as a normal threat.
Yes.
Gary, one more thing I wanted to ask, which again, it's a general question, which I always wanted to know. I mean, when you see Bond movies, MI6, Secret
Yeah.
Service,
Yeah.
so how much of your professional life in you share with your family? Is it like a daily job? I come back home, oh, I had a bad day, or like you could share few things you cannot. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. So it
Does
goes
it
both
know
ways.
everything, or she doesn't know? Of course, you have written a book now, but back then, did she know
Right.
everything what
Well,
was
that's fun. Yeah. As I was writing the book, she came to understand that there was a lot of stuff that we had. There were threats when I was in the Secret Service, when I was in the Air Force, when I was in the Secret Service, and also as an air marshal. There were threats that were pretty legitimate. And here's a good example. When I was in the Secret Service, when Bill Clinton was president, he brokered a peace accord between the PLO and Israel. It was very famous. They came to the White House. They had Palestinians. They had Israelis. They had Yasser Arafat and Itzhak Rabin in the same room. And this brings up another point I'd like to make. If you were to ask me, hey, Gary, do you understand what hate and fear is? I'd say yes. And if I asked you the same question, you'd say, yeah, I know what hate is. I never understood what hate was until I saw them try to put these two guys in a room.
Oh.
Yasser Arafat and Itzhak Rabin have been trying to kill each other for 40 years. And if you're a Palestinian that believes in the PLO, you look at Israel as a terrorist organization, and vice versa.
Yeah.
They hate each other. And I'm telling you, I was a 35-year-old man, and I watched these two guys. Bill Clinton had to literally grab their hands and force them together. They were shaking with anger. It was unbelievable. So my point is that day, the Secret Service came to us. We had a big meeting in the morning at hundreds of people. We started at 3:30 in the morning, and they said, this is it. We're going to get attacked today. We're sure of it. We don't, the CIA, the FBI, they don't have any details, but we just find it hard to believe with all these people. And one of the things they were worried about was the inside threat. Like we doubled the screening of everybody coming in. We were walking dogs by them that sniff for explosives and guns but so this goes back to my point I said earlier, where when it comes to management, I have some issues with the Secret Service, but they pulled this off. I mean, it was a 22-hour day, but I don't even think somebody broke a toenail. You know what I mean? Like, it was unbelievable. And I got to see so much stuff. It was great.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I think it is one of the most historical, historical happenings in history, which is undisturbed yet. Still, things are fine. Things are fine yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. When it comes to politics and these when people try to do this, my belief, my experience, because I watched a lot of it, it's better to do it and fail, or take the chance of failing, or they do it and it doesn't mean anything, but at least you tried to do something. That's my feeling.
Yes. Again, Gary, back to the question.
Sure, go ahead.
How much was your wife or your family, aware of things that time? Now, of course.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things I didn't tell them.
Okay.
So when I first started the Secret Service, we didn't have kids. We were just married.
Yeah.
And so our kids came along about 8 years later.
Yeah.
And so by the time I transferred from the Secret Service over to the Air Marshals, so my kids were like a baby and 4 years old. And so they didn't understand what it was I did. And then when I was an Air Marshal, my son was probably about, probably 8 years old, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And one of my friends, our kids played together. He came to me one day and he said, hey, I think your son has issues with what you do. He's been talking about it. I think they're just starting to understand that your job as an air marshal is to sit on a plane and basically wait for somebody to try to cut your head off. And so, I went to my son one day and I said, what's going on? You have some fears or questions about what I do, and of course he acted like he didn't know what I was talking about, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you don't tell them.
Yeah.
In the Secret Service, in the Air Marshals, because one, it's classified, and two, I mean, how nervous do you want them to be? I mean, I'm sure that, like, when I was writing especially the second book or the first book, and I did a lot of the writing sitting right where I am in my dining room with my co-writer Grant Schmidt, and at times, like, I'd be trying to tell him a story, and Jenny would come in and she'd say, "Oh, I remember that." And I'd say, "Okay, well, this is what I didn't tell you at the time." And I tell Grant this is what I couldn't tell her at the time. Now it's okay to talk about it. Or
revelations which came while you were writing the book and your wife discovered then, yeah? I mean,
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So.
Okay. And Gary, like you said you received threats. Now I want to come to that part where when you wrote your book, you have obviously written things about Clinton and the whole presidential time, So when you were releasing your book, did you receive, say, I wouldn't say flack, like say people or supporters who didn't want to accept what is written, because I think by the time you had released the book, social media was coming up. I think in US, social media was there from earlier. I think the other parts of the world, we are now exposed to social media more than we were before. But then did you expect like you will flack, and did you expect to receive threats regarding with respect to the book you are writing, all such stuff? Did you, because it's a brave thing to do, like
thank you. Well, so here's the thing. I didn't look at, when I decided to do this, because
it's
before,
when
I was in the Secret Service, I never thought I would talk about what happened. But as years went by and I look back at what happened, and at the time people attacked us, the uniformed division officers like myself that were compelled to testify, and it really came down to this. The case of me testifying and my coworkers testifying against President Clinton went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the chief of the Supreme Court at the time, Rehnquist, ordered us to testify. He singled me out because I had risen to the top of this issue. And he said I had 72 hours to voluntarily testify or be prosecuted. So you're not going to go to jail for somebody else's bad behavior. So I went and I told my story. And of course we got ripped apart. So years later, I felt like it was time to tell my side of the story. None of my coworkers were in a position to do it. I felt like I was in a unique position where I had been in the government. I wasn't in the Secret Service anymore. I was as an air marshal. I saw things differently. I wasn't necessarily drinking the Kool-Aid, as we say. And and I saw things differently, and I felt like it needed to be told. And I was in a unique position where I could retire shortly. So I decided to do that. Now, I never thought I would, but I completely flipped around the other way. And I felt like my goal wasn't to keep Hillary Clinton out of the office. My goal was to tell the truth. If you like them and you live in the United States, you vote for them. None of my business. But here's who they really were. The people that support the Clinton. The people that support the Clintons, of course, are always going to support them. But there were some people in the middle who weren't sure. And they read my book and they said, "Oh my God, I see it. I see what the truth is." And the people that are from the other side who, they read the book and they thought it was great, and it fell into place. I wasn't trying to, I didn't bring somebody into the book that I didn't have to. I told the truth. I told what the facts were. I linked the facts together and showed people that this is really what was going on. President Clinton had his version, Monica Lewinsky had her version, and I told you what the truth was. So, without a bias, I wasn't worried. So anyway, I did get some, I knew I was going to get ripped apart. And the books did much better than I thought they would.
Yeah,
I really thought
yeah.
I really thought I'd be destroyed, but we thought it was worth taking the chance.
What was your wife's reaction when you actually say you were midway and like, you know, you had the material ready to publish the book almost? Did she tell you like, I mean, did she have a feeling that no, let's not do it, or like she was supportive? You know, anyone can understand their part as well, because
Yeah.
you don't want to risk your future of your children. Anything could happen, you know, like technology is so advanced. You know, that way, like, what was your wife's reaction?
So when I first brought it up to it, when my co-writer, Grant Schmidt, he's a family friend.
Yeah.
And he's a much younger guy than me. And he had graduated from Temple Film School. He had a small film company. They made videos, and he made a documentary about the Holocaust. Anyway, so he came to me and he said, hey, on my next project, I want to write your life story. And I said, no, it's not going to happen. It's nobody's business. He's like, oh, it's interesting. I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know. So anyway, he's very persistent, and his parents wanted me to do it. So anyway, try to make a long story short. So I said, listen, my wife is never going to agree to this, never. So I said, but what I'll do is, and I told them, I said, you don't understand what you're asking of me. And they saw like, you know, successful book and, you know, whatever. And I saw pain. And I saw me possibly losing my government pension, and, you know, so anyway, and I didn't even know if I could do it legally at first. So I told them, I'll give you 4 months. And in that 4 months, you're going to do the research and realize what you're asking me to do. And I am going to talk to Grant. I'm going to tell him some stories. I'll give him a writing sample, because I'm a crappy writer. I'm a cop. When I write a scenario of what happened, I write it who, where, when, what, how. I have no elegant writing style. But as you can see by talking to me, when it comes to verbally telling a story, some people say I'm pretty good at it. So I told Grant some of my stories, and he wrote them down. And, you know, a lot of the stuff he wrote originally, I threw out. It was crap. And he was trying to be too flamboyant. And I had a couple must always and never haves, caveats as we call them. Must always tell the truth. Must always not include anybody unless you have to. If they're already a public figure, fine. 20 years later, I don't need to harm anybody else's reputation. I want to, and that was the Secret Service, the Clinton staff, anybody. There was no reason to make anybody. Listen, if you interacted with me at that time and you were negative, you're already a public figure. I didn't need to hurt anybody else. Yeah. And there were some people, you know what I mean? Yeah. And there were some people in the Secret Service, and there were some people in the Clinton staff that were shitheads. But 20 years later, how vengeful do I need to be? You know, let it go. So of course. The story is about me, what Bill Clinton did, what Hillary Clinton did, what Monica Lewinsky did, and how it all interacted. That's what the story was about, and that's what I stuck to. So after about 2 months, Grant had 3 working chapters and what we were calling a foreword. And I took it with me one night I was still flying as an air marshal. I was flying a mission overnight to Munich, Germany, staying there for about 20 hours and then flying back. That's how the air marshals work. So on the way, I started reading it. When I got to the hotel, I took a nap, I read some more. I worked out, I finished reading it, and I was like, oh my God, this is, you know, holy crap. This is, you know, when you look at it from a third party perspective, I'm like, this is interesting. You know, so on the way back from Germany, it's a 10.5-hour flight, I think, of roughly that day. Munich, it was in the winter, so it takes longer. Anyway, so I read it again. I completely flipped the other way. And I said, this is my mission. I have to tell my side of the story. This is what I believe in. I believe in the truth. I believe in our Constitution, our constitutional republic. And if you don't get the truth out, again, vote for whoever you want, but know what the facts are. So when I came home, I gave my wife the copies of what I had. And I said, I need you to read this. And she's like, what's the problem? I'm like, just read it. She goes, is this that crap you're working on with something like that, with Grant? I'm like, yeah. So anyway, eventually she got time to read it. And she completely flipped the other way. She said, you have to do this. She said, you have to tell your story. And I said, we could lose our pension. She said, if we lost our pension, could we survive? And I said, yeah, we could. She said, you got to do this. You got to tell your side of the story. So I went to my friend Grant and his parents, and I said, be careful what you wish for. And I said, before we sign off on this, I'm not spending any of my own money. We're going to have to spend a lot of money on lawyers. And I had done some research at the time, and I knew legally I could do it. There were no confidentiality agreements at the time.
I mean, they made a movie on George Bush smoking weed. So I think, they're already done it. So
yeah. So my friend's father, who makes a pretty good living, he said, listen, I will front the money. And I said, I don't want to take a loan out from you. He goes, no. He goes, I knew these people well. He said, I have the income where I can do this. And he said, and I will give you a document saying that if this doesn't work out, that this is my expenditure and nobody owes me anything. And he was true to his word. By the time we got an agent and a contract, he had spent about $20,000 in lawyers fees. And the book was pretty successful. They got their money back. We all made, we were a three-person partnership. Yes. We all made a little bit of money. And I got to tell my side of the story, and it felt great. I loved the best interviews ever are when people try to hammer me, when they try, I love being interviewed when they don't agree with me. It's great. It was freedom. I got to, it's hard you got to be careful when you're talking on TV. You and I right now, we're being, you can edit this or whatever. And, if I drop the F-bomb, it's okay. But when you're on TV, you can't. So you had to be careful. But I'm glad I did it. Yes, my wife had a lot of concerns. We were concerned about everything. And we're glad we did it.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much for your words. It was a very nice podcast, and we are coming to an end to my episode as well. And this was a pretty entertaining session, Gary, because there were things which I wanted to discuss, and I think I have asked whatever I wanted to. I got a decent picture of, I had things in my mind which now I think, I was kind of right. There are things which I had perceived before about a Secret Service agent, which,
right.
With the discussion with you, it kind of fits the bill now. Finally, Gary, before we sign off, I have one last question. Do you miss it? Do you miss the job?
Yeah, sort of. So what I miss is I miss some of my colleagues. And unfortunately, when you get to the age that I am, I'm in my late 50s. Unfortunately in life, part of life is dying. And some of those great people have passed away from accidents, disease, and that kind of stuff. I tell you what, to put it in a nutshell for you, what I miss is unfettered access to the White House. You literally had a key. And when I transferred over to the Air Marshals, I was at the training center. I was training people, officers and agents, to become officers and agents. My specialty was firearms. I loved it. I had unlimited access to guns and ammo and training, and that's what I miss. A little that's ego driven, because literally you had access to the White House, and so I missed that. I don't miss the aggravation, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't even blink an eye. I'd go forward and do it. So
nice to hear. And that's it, Gary. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. It was a lovely interview, and I think it was pretty entertaining as well, discussing so many things and ranging from movies to your book to how your journey was. And I hope some other day I can connect with you again. To have a lengthy conversation on your book alone, only on your book. Probably I'll schedule something soon just to discuss your book. Anytime, and I'll be a little bit better with the Zoom link up. Yes. No problem, Gary.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye, Gary. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys. So that was the end of our podcast with Mr. Gary. I hope it was pretty insightful for you guys. And I mean, of everything you've heard of Secret Service agents and everything you've seen, I think this interview will kind of open your minds, and I hope you guys get a point of view. And that's it, guys. That's it for today. I hope you like this video. I hope you like my content. If you do, please press the like button. Please subscribe to my channel and keep watching more stuff on Bing and Bong. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.